All right, guys, welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to Archive Gaming. So today I'm going to start reviewing some of the scenarios for this game for Nobunaga's Ambition Complete Edition. So this is for Complete Edition, so if you don't have Complete Edition, you might be missing some of these. For example, I know that 1580 Tensho Monkey Show is exclusive only to the Complete Edition or the Deluxe Edition. Depending on what region you're in, right? So you might be missing some of these. But you should have most of these if you have Complete Edition. You should have most of them. Now, the rating that I'm going to use, the categories I'm going to use to judge these scenarios is going to be its unique factor. You know, how does it stand among the rest of the starting dates in the game? You know, what does it have that makes it stand out? You know, makes it a little bit different or gives it a little bit of nuance, its own special sauce, right? The replay value is another thing, of course, that you have to consider with these games. How often can you play it? How open is it to player agency? How often can you get in there and come up and just craft your own narrative or turn things around with different forces? You know, how locked in are you to just being railroaded, right? And the last thing, it's just the cool factor. You know, the rule of cool. How well does the starting date follow that rule? How much room is there for you to just do outlandish, outrageous stuff, right? How crazy can you get in the starting dates? You know, they're not all equal. Some of them you're really locked into a certain way. But there is a distinction between the cool factor and the replay factor. You know, sometimes these three will overlap with each other, but some starting dates have very little uniqueness, right? Their standard of fare, for example, they might not have the greatest replay value, but the cool factor will be over the top because there's just one reason to play that scenario, in my opinion. A lot of them have that, where it's just like, listen, there's not a lot of other things to do in this starting date. And you could play a million other ones that have more interesting things going on, but for this starting date specifically, playing as this clan in this situation, that carries that starting date on its back, right? So that's the cool factor. So we're going to start with the very first scenario in the game, the birth of Nobunaga. We'll go through it, give the three ratings, some categories, and then later on I might do a follow-up video where I highlight some of the clans, you know, depending on time permitting, right? So let's get started here. Okay, so the first thing we want to look at is the uniqueness factor of Birth of Nobunaga. So Birth of Nobunaga, I mean, it kind of wears it right on its sleeve. Nobunaga has just been born. This is not Nobunaga is here. He is here, but you know what I mean? He's just been born. He's just barely entered the chat, if you will. He's not ready to go yet. So, despite its namesake, everything else that's going on is far more interesting, okay? Far more interesting. So, we'll start with the main thing, right? It's 1534. This scenario is at least, is it 8 years? 9 years earlier than the previous start date in the game, so they've really rolled back the time. And it just impacts the map heavily, okay? The main thing with rolling back the time this far back, well, there's a couple points. First point, we have a lot of daimyo that previously were in the game files, but they were already dead when the game started, okay? Anybody who's been playing this for a year will tell you the same thing. There's a lot of dead daimyo in this game that you just can't use unless you're playing a fictional start. For example, Tsunehisa, leader of the Imago, okay? Guy's already gone when the game starts normally. We have access to him this time. Ujiteru, Imagawa. I'm a huge Imagawa fan, usually gone. He's available. An actual Nobutora start date, Shingen's father. Big, impactful daimyos, right? Kenshin's father, who I think was available for Musket to arrive for like a year, but these daimyo here, you get a good 6-7 years with them, okay? Before you have to worry about them passing away or, in Nobutora's case, being exiled. something like that. So we have a lot of daimyos that are just not around, and that reflects in the force selection. There's a lot of forces that are just, they just don't exist, right? For example, we've got the force that the Ryuzoji work for, the Shoni clan. This clan is usually not in the game. This is the clan where the Ryuzoji are kind of birthed from. They're in the game. The Shimazu are still split between the two families. It's just a lot of, you just have access to a lot of stuff that you wouldn't normally have in this start date. You know, again, a lot of guys that just existed in the game files. And it's not just daimyo, there's a lot of regular officers as well, but the big standouts are the daimyo in the game. So, following up on that, another point in the uniqueness for this, a lot of the castles are very small. There's a lot of small castle starts in this, and because you're so early in the map, the officer pool, a lot of these forces are just not filled out yet, okay? Because they're not filled out yet, but it's early in the game, we're not talking late game, we're talking the earliest start date, there's a lot of officers that are yet to come. So, in the beginning, like right here, we're playing as Kunichika, for example. We've only got 7 officers. Our neighbor's got 3, okay? Our guy to the east is a single, just one guy. On the left side over here, just 7 people, okay? There's a lot of little castle starts, and it makes this starting date perfect for people who just want to really take their time and enjoy the ramp up. You know, ramping up, turning it into the, you know, enjoying the passage of time, enjoying the events, which really there's not a lot of events. You know, there's not a huge ton of events, but again, to me, that works in this favor. For this starting date, it works in its favor because you can just play and chill and slowly grow. Almost every region, okay, Kyushu, Chugoku, Shikoku, every region in this game, and this starting date has maybe 1 or no major powers in it. Almost every region. What that means is that no matter who you're playing as, you can make an alliance with the biggest fella on the block, okay? And as long as you have that alliance with him, you are free to just chill, to just kick back and expand at your own pace. You know, wait around to see officers show up. However, you know, it just gives you a lot of freedom. And because the starting date is so early, that means that every officer in the game that's not appeared yet is going to be appearing pretty soon. You know, the officer pool is going to grow very, very quickly as the years roll by because there's so many empty castles that have to be filled in. So many, I mean, even the biggest forces on this map, some really big forces on this map only have like 10 people, you know. For example, the Nagao here, they've got 16 people. That's a lot on this map. You know, Nobutora, 12 officers. That's a lot to start comparatively to everyone else. I think the average, if I had to guess, I'd say the average officer count is about 7, maybe 6. And again, it's great. Ultimately, it gives this starting date the closest thing to a blank canvas out of all the start dates. It feels very, very like this is as close as it gets to a blank canvas where it's like, where do you want to start? As the player, it's like, where do you want to start? Make an alliance with one of the big forces, okay, as insurance, and then you can just do whatever you want. And you can take your time. There's no pressure. It's just, again, it's just a canvas, and you can paint on it however you want to, whichever way you want to. There's nothing but pros to me for this. In terms of uniqueness, it just stands out. And really, it's a slam dunk. This is a starting date that should have been included a long time ago. It's an absolute slam dunk. So the uniqueness, I got to give it, I would say a 5 out of 5. It's just, it's hard to beat a situation like this. It's so early. Everyone's available. Everyone's going to show up later on. Okay, let's get to replay because these overlap a little bit, right? So with replay, because of the way that this is set up, because it's so early and everything, it gives it replay value because of that, because you can branch your paths as much as you want. Now, this doesn't even include editing, but playing as some of these guys, these daimyo who are here, you could extend their lifespan. For example, Tsunehisa, if you want to play him longer. Nobutora gets exiled, for example. Okay, we'll turn off the event so he doesn't get exiled, or maybe exile Shingen, right? Start a run that way. Ujiteru passes away maybe 2 years after this starts. Extend his lifespan, or turn off the event that he doesn't pass away. You have access, combining the access of these guys that you don't normally have with how much of a slow start this map is, it increases the replay, because you can get much farther before you hit a brick wall. The brick wall that you hit in later scenarios. Once the game goes on, forces start to get more and more established, and it becomes more and more difficult for you to kind of input your own agency, to have your own agency over everything. It gets more and more difficult. It gets more and more tricky. I actually feel like this is probably one of the best starting beginner scenarios that you can have. Again, and it gives it replay because of that. Because it's like you can load in. This is one of the few ones where you can say, I'm going to play as Chosokabe. This time, this guy's only got 3 officers, but I'm going to play as them, and it's fine. I'm not going to get annihilated right away. I just have to make an alliance with the big guy, leverage that, and I'm still in it. This is one of those few starting dates that you could do that. And again, the officer pool growing, it's the networking. It makes stuff like networking and employ really crazy in an early start date, because if you guys have played Romance of the Three Kingdoms, the Yellow Turban Rebellion, for example, you just don't know who's going to show up, and that's part of the fun in replayability. It's just like, okay, I'm going to play as Chosokabe, but last time I went east, took over this castle, and I used my alliance, I invaded over here. This time I'm going to go west, and I'm going to see who I can find in this direction, right? You could do that with any force. Normally, if you're playing the middle start dates, there's only a few people, maybe, that it might change everything up. But because it's so early, anybody can show up. And just you changing your direction changes the whole trajectory of the run. And because it's so early, it changes the run radically. There's very little effort that you have to do to totally change how everything plays out in this. You have to just the smallest tweaks. This starting date is the time traveler moves a chair scenario. The time traveler moves a chair, he kicks a chair over, and it radically changes everything. This is the easiest starting date to do that. So the replayability is just, it's I don't want to say endless, but it's close to endless. And for me, that's what stands out. The networking and the employee opportunities. But outside of that, this is the only place where you're going to get to play as some of these older forces that just don't exist. The Kobayakawa, for example, that Motonari ends up absorbing. The Kikawa that ends up joining Motonari. The factions, the daimyo. But more importantly for me, the officer pool. You don't know who you're going to get, and I would recommend playing as a force, or maybe creating an officer that has networking, just for that reason, so that you have a higher chance of finding someone. The last thing I want to say about replay, and this is a small knock because it's not too severe, and it's a consistent problem throughout the game, but if you are playing this, there's a high chance that it's usually gonna be the same couple of forces that take over the map. So once you do, execute your little strategy, and you expand, and you see who you get, and you change it up as much as you can, when you get to mid to end game, you're probably going to face the same juggernauts. So Hosokawa, until they splinter, or if they don't splinter, they might not splinter. Again, we're so far back that things can get derailed. The sequence of events can get derailed. But Hosokawa, Ouchi, these are clans that usually fall apart, but the impact in this starting date is so far away that you'll probably face them. You'll probably end up facing these types of clans while they're still at full strength. The true Asugi, the Norimasa's Uesugi, big clan that's going to stay strong. The Imagawa is definitely not going anywhere. The Imagawa is going to be a powerhouse for a very long time. So you're going to see kind of the same big forces But you know, it's a small knock against replayability because this is just how it is with grand strategy games that are historical based. Now with editing and stuff, you can change this, and I might have a video talking about how I go through and edit things so that it's more sandbox like. That might be its own video. But if you're sticking to the story in the beginning and you're just starting out, you know, just expect kind of the same guys to kind of run away with the map. If you've played Three Kingdom games, you know, Cao Cao, the Wu forces, those guys usually stick around. They take over everything, no matter what start date you're on. This is a consistent problem with Nobunaga's Ambition. It's just how it is. It's a historical game. As long as you have the events on and you don't tinker with stuff, you're kind of going to see the same guys kind of become the mid to late game forces that you have to overcome. It's not that egregious in the starting date, though. So it's just a small knock against it. It's just a couple forces versus later on. So replay, I'd say a 4 out of 5. 4 out of 5 for replay. Pretty damn good. It's really hard to find any fault in this. I mean, I can't think of anything off the top of my head that's very like, okay, yes, it has all this replay. Yes, it's very different from everything else. But you know what? These couple of things really weigh it down. There's nothing like that in this. I mean, short and sweet. There's nothing like that in this. This is a 5 out of 5 for the cool factor. For the rule of cool, it's a 5 out of 5. There's endless possibilities, endless ideas. The only knock is just, yeah, you're probably gonna face the same big guys if you don't edit. If you don't make some edits or maybe turn off some events or something, you know, move things around a little bit, you're gonna face the same couple of guys. But that's a standard affair. And you know, I do wish that some of these returning daimyo that we're getting, some of these daimyo who are usually gone or not long for the world, that now we have more time with, such as Takakage, Asakura, who else? Nobuhide. Speaking of, let's get to the Nobunaga's father here. Some of these guys, their traits and their loadouts, right? Their kits are very, very mid. They're mid. Nobutora, big Nobutora fan, for example. Guy's got caution. You know what I mean? Guy's got caution. Doesn't make any sense. A lot of these guys feel like, yeah, you know, they could use some edits, maybe some reworks. Ujitsuna Hojo, again, missing a trait. Bowman, kind of some mid-tier stuff. Not enough at all to drag the whole thing down whatsoever. This is all stuff that you can fix in editing, and in fact, for this starting date, I may do, now that I think about it, you see what I mean? A lot of these guys are they're just kind of some stuff kind of thrown in there. So I might do a video just reworking some of these daimyo, because they're not usually available. But I feel like now that it's their time to shine, they should get some unique traits. A lot of them just have generic things that are probably, when they only existed as files because they were dead in the game and you couldn't access them, you couldn't really use them outside of the fictional, you know, the rival heroes start date. They probably didn't get a rework. So a lot of these daimyo do kind of need their own rework, but it's nowhere near enough to affect anything, and that's something that you can fix yourself. You can put your own seasoning, your own flavor on those guys however you want. So it's not going to affect it at all. So the coolness factor, it's a 5 out of 5. Easy. There's nothing really. I can't find any faults with this. This starting date is a slam dunk for Koei. It should be a standard. It should be available in every Nobunaga's game, Nobunaga's Ambition game, right from the beginning. Not as DLC, not added on later. This should be a starting date, but you know, I think they know that, so that's why they held it back for this one. One final note I will say about the events: a lot of events were not added to this. Like, very few events were actually added to this starting date, and they do feel a little bit like an afterthought. So just a warning, if you're playing this and you're expecting a lot of, things to be added because we're going 8 years further back, no. Not really. And the events that are there, they're kind of, they're kind of quickly put together. I'll say that. They look like they're kind of a rush job, the events that are there. So, again, doesn't affect the overall for this because there's so many positives and they're just crushing it with everything else. So the events not being fleshed out or there not being a lot of events, to me, they don't really matter too much. In fact, they would get in the way of this blank canvas effect that this starting date has that makes it stand out so much. So, yeah, that about wraps it up. Like I said, 5 out of 5 for uniqueness. This stands out like crazy. Replay value, 4 out of 5. And the rule of cool, 5 out of 5, man. This is a near perfect starting date, near perfect scenario. And this is me personally. I'm somebody who likes to play larger size maps. I like to play with big forces, mid to large forces, right? That's where I'm at with playing Grand Strategy right now. But even coming from me, on this map where there's only a few mid to large forces, and they're kind of, they only have 10 officers, 12 officers. It's not like they have all this flexibility, which I usually like. Even with all that, it's still a near perfect starting date. Birth of Nobunaga is still a near perfect starting date. And I'm somebody who's on the complete other side of the spectrum. I don't want, I'm not really a big, let's have a lot of little forces types of player. I'm not really like that anymore. So I still think this is incredible. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. We might highlight some spots on this map later. I'll do a follow-up video, and maybe I'll get around to doing a rework of the daimios, and I'll show that off too, my recommendations for daimyo reworks. But until the next time, guys, if you could please do me a favor, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and I'll catch you on the next one. Till then, take care.